Franchising is the ultimate way to scale fast, empower other entrepreneurs, and grow your business into a powerful success. But when's the right time to franchise and who should consider it? Today, we'll explore how franchising can transform your business and create new opportunities. This is Ryan Atkinson, and you're listening to the UpFlip podcast, where we cover the secrets of building and running successful businesses. Joining us today is Dr. Tom DuFore, the CEO of Big Sky Franchise Team, who has helped brands like Jamba Juice and Massage Envy expand through franchising. With his extensive expertise, Tom will share key insights on how franchising can unlock massive growth for your business. Tom, I am so excited to have you on here today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
We got to set the stage about who Tom DuFore is, because you've helped many well-known brands like Jamba Juice and Two Men in a Truck franchise their businesses. Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey, how you got started in the franchising world?
Sure. It's a great question. And my story in getting into franchising is not all that different from most people in franchising. When you speak with them, it usually happens by accident. It's not something that someone set out to do. So for me, I've spent pretty much my entire career in franchising. And when I was in undergrad, I was a business management major and knew that I wanted to get into some form of management consulting. And it just so happened to be that my first opportunity was working for a company that helped other businesses and business owners turn their company into a franchise system. And so from there, I fell in love right away with the business and have stayed in franchising ever since.
Interesting. I think you have an interesting perspective to it, because you've been a franchisee, you've been a franchisor, you've been a consultant. How has that franchise trifecta shaped your approach to helping businesses scale through franchising then?
Yeah, I think my experience in having worked with franchisors as a consultant, helping them launch these small businesses to grow, as well as working with large brands, having been a franchisee and being a franchisee and actually paying your monthly royalties, or weekly, if it's weekly, the brand and system I was with, it was monthly royalties, and going through training and hiring staff and following the process. And then at the same token, also being involved with a small franchise system on the franchisor side of things. It really changes your perspective. And I would say that the biggest influence for me has for sure been the experience as a franchisee. And it's a reminder, as I'm advising and coaching clients that are franchising their business or that are franchisors, that franchising is not a money grab. It's helping someone else to accomplish their dream. It's helping someone else to start a business and grow, and remembering as a franchisee what it was like to pay my 7% plus my advertising fees, plus all the other requirements and so on that's part of running the system. So that has really helped temper and keep perspective that it's about helping franchisees win. Essentially, if you can help the franchisee win, the rest of the franchise model works.
Talking about franchises on the podcast, it's always so exciting because it really expands beyond the McDonald's, the Chick-fil-A's, the Burger Kings. Because when people think of franchising, I feel like a lot of times they're thinking of just food chains, but it obviously expands beyond that. But before we dive in more into franchising, if you had to explain in the simplest terms what exactly a franchise is, how would you describe it?
I would describe franchising, and this comes up often in terms of what actually defines a franchise. How do I know whether this is a franchise? Or sometimes people will say, maybe is it licensing or is it some business opportunity? And at the core, franchising is a method of distribution. And that is where it gets confused with other forms of distribution, such as licensing or dealerships or distributorships or business opportunities and so on. There's a big list of them. At the core, franchising is an enterprise becomes a franchise when the three main parts are combined. And it's the use of, when someone else, if for a business owner that maybe ends up listening in, it would be, well, are they using your business name, what you do business as? Number two, are they using your business systems? And number three is the payment of a fee upfront or ongoing for them. We're talking more than, a few $100s one time. We're talking about an upfront or ongoing fee. And if you check yes to all of those, chances are you probably fall into the franchise category. Certainly there are some exceptions to that, but generally that's the situation.
When you think about like the pros and cons of franchising, because someone might be listening and be like, okay, like I'm starting to build this company or I'm building my company and like maybe this is set up for franchising. I don't know. Before they even consider that, can you talk to us about the pros and cons for business owners looking to franchise their company?
Sure. Well, there are three main reasons and drivers that are the pro side for turning your business into a franchise. The first is money, and it takes money to open up more locations. And so in franchising, the franchisee is investing to open that location. So the franchisee is essentially a mini investor into the system, is one way to view it. The second is management. And so that franchisee that comes in, they are managing the business, the day-to-day operations, and having it consulted with tens of thousands of successful entrepreneurs and CEOs and business owners around the country and around the world. Far above and away, almost always the number one pain point is staff and people, and either finding, hiring, retaining the right people to keep it at the company to keep it going. And so with franchising, you get a vested owner, and in many cases, a vested owner operator that is the person that when someone doesn't show up for whatever reason, that franchisee takes that responsibility to fill that shift or find a replacement and so on. And then the third pro is what we call multiply. So I like alliteration. So it's money, management, and multiply. And franchising just gives someone the opportunity to expand at a much more rapid rate. And headline stories, I'm sure most of your listeners have seen franchise headliners where it says, oh, such and such brand sells 50 franchises in a year or 100 franchises in a year. Now, those are the exceptions, not the norm. But for most small business owners, what I've found is if they only ever sold one franchise a year, for most, that would be viewed at almost an exponential type of rate for them to go. Maybe they've been operating 7-8 years. If they had opened one a year, they'd have 7 or 8 already instead of, in most cases, one. So those are the pros when you start thinking about, oh, wow, this is great. In addition to, obviously, you get some benefits to the financial side of things, of course, for the royalty revenue that comes long term. Some of the, I would say, disadvantages or the cons to franchising is if the founder of the enterprise is not interested in being a coach or a trainer, that's a problem. You have to be getting into this because you love your system and you really want to help others use your system as a conduit to build a business of their own. And number two, you want to have that driver to serve other customers in other markets. And if you don't have that drive where you see your product or service serving other local communities around the country or around the world, it's hard to convince someone that franchising is right for them. And then the final piece is, when I think of cons, a lot of owners I've met with over the years that don't end up franchising or do franchise and have a hard time with it are those that are unable to let go of the daily operations, where they're the superstar owner, which is great. I love that. I'm an owner operator in my business today. I love my business. So I relate with that. I really get it. But if you're unable as the owner to let go of that, it really can make franchising difficult. And if that's the case, I would say maybe you should pause or not franchise at that point.
I absolutely love that. And what's really exciting about this is like you're dropping a ton of insights here, but you're also going to be having your academy course where you talk about all the franchising stuff there. So I'm super excited for that course actually to come out as well. A point that I just like that you discussed was you have to get into franchising if you like to be a coach, if you like to train people, like to develop their skills. I think when you think about entrepreneurship, that's like one of the most crucial skills that you need to have when you are starting a business. If you are going to hire talent, is being able to coach and be able to train. And that even matters when you're franchising as well.
Yeah, you spend any time scrolling on any social feed, YouTube, Instagram, any social feed you're on and you're a professional, it says, well, if you have 3 years experience in whatever field you are, be a coach, be a coach, be a coach. And it's all well and good. I always think for the entrepreneur, franchising is the original way to capture and bottle up your intellectual property that you've created in a business that you love and now expand it or scale it through franchising while being a coach. You're coaching in a business you already know just about everything there is to know about it.
One thing that comes to mind here, I want to drop a few examples of companies that are franchising. I dropped the McDonald's, the Chick-fil-A's, the Burger Kings, but it obviously expands beyond that. So can you give us some specific examples that people should look for when they're just on their drive of potential like franchising opportunities?
Sure. So I would say for someone that's listening in that's maybe ends up hearing this and thinking, okay, well, maybe I want to buy a franchise, or they might be thinking, I'm in a business where maybe I want to franchise my business, but I'm not in food. So can I even franchise it? And the reality is, in today's franchise world, the diversity in types of business offerings is the most robust I've ever seen it. I've been doing this over 20 years now, and it continues to expand and grow. Dozens and dozens of industries. In fact, more than half of all franchisors that are offered are some form of service-oriented business. So it's not necessarily in food or hospitality. Now, those still exist, and they can be a great option for someone. Since COVID, for roughly the last 4 years, the number one category of interest for potential franchise buyers has been home services. So these are home service brands such as a painting franchise or a window washing or a landscaping or a pest control business or something in that regard where there's some home service availability. So it is very broad, very wide. And my thought is, if you're looking to buy a franchise, most often where I like to start is, what kind of lifestyle are you interested in living, as just kind of a starting point, and then build from there, because you'll find a lot of different industries can meet that. And then if you're thinking of franchising your business, if your business, any industry you're in, if you want to expand, it's worth considering franchising. I think you ought to. It doesn't mean you should, but you should at least consider it.
We've had a few interviews on the podcast of home service companies like Jordan Montgomery, Carter of Pink's Windows. Like, these are home service companies that are franchising at a great scale, and it shows the opportunity that it expands beyond just fast food chains. But I want to take on the part, someone's like, okay, I'm going to start a home service business or any type of business, and they're thinking about franchising their company. Let's dive into that process. What are the first steps a business owner should take when deciding to convert their business into a franchise?
Sure. So I think the first part we like to look at is the viability of franchising. Is how can you just at least run a quick litmus test to see, does my business qualify to be franchised? And there's not necessarily a legal per se requirement around that, but the general benchmarks we use, we have 3 big check boxes that we use to help companies and owners think about, well, do I qualify to franchise? And the first we like to see is pretty basic and simple, you would think, but it's, do you have a profitable prototype? Essentially is, do you have a business operating and is it profitable? And that is, in short terms, a proof of concept, right? You want to be able to show someone that you've created and operated it. Now, there are many factors that we can dig into, some of those financials and so on, but from a high level, a profitable prototype. And oftentimes owners will say, well, my tax return shows I didn't make any money. I'm not as concerned about the tax return, because every owner takes what I call owner benefit out of their business in different ways. Some are taking draws, some are paying salary, some are doing insurance or bonus or whatever they're running through their business, however they're structuring it. So think of it as owner benefit. Is it profitable in that sense? The second checkbox I look at then is, can you teach someone how to do this? Which we were talking about before, about being a coach. And in one regard, it's, can you teach? One. And number 2, it's really, are you willing to teach someone how to do it, is maybe a better way to describe that. And then the third big bucket or checkbox we look at is this something where there is an existing customer base for your product or service on a national basis? At minimum, we want to see regional. Sometimes it's regional and ideally international. Who knows where this ends up going long term? And that just means basically, are there customers who would buy your product or service if you're based in Texas? Will they also then buy this in Ohio or Washington State or Florida or wherever it may be?
Let's talk about that aspect, because that kind of goes back to like building a business plan about like, what markets are you going to serve? Like, who are you going to serve? All that type of stuff. So when you are thinking about like franchising your company, like, how does a franchise business plan differ from a regular like startup business plan? Like, what key factors should be included in that franchising business plan?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when you're franchising a business, and this is a process we take our clients through, and it's something I advise whether we do the work or not, if someone's doing it on their own. We call our product the franchise blueprint. And ultimately, a franchise business plan differs from a standard business plan because it's focused on the franchisee economics first. What do we expect a typical franchisee to look like? And so we look at the quantitative aspects, like what are these quantitative components for a franchisee? And in most cases, we actually discount the revenue, profitability, and other numbers generated at the founder's location. We find that most founders, their individual location will likely fall in the top 10% of, let's say, 100 franchisees. They'd likely be in the top 10. So we need to discount that to say, well, what would an average franchisee look like? Once we figure out that franchisee model, then we build the franchisor model, which is the model that you would be getting into as a franchise system, which is, what does this look like for the franchisor? How many franchises do you think you're going to sell over what time period? What kind of staffing do you need? What are things like, what should you charge for your franchise fee, for your royalty? What should your territory structure look like? And then we start getting into some of these qualitative aspects: training, support, franchisee buyer profile. So this is not how you run the day-to-day operation of an individual location, which a typical business plan is structured on. This is saying, what does this run as a franchisor system? You're in a new business now, and you're in the franchising business, not in the, if you're in the home services, food business, whatever, you're not in that business anymore. You're in the franchising business.
I think there's like a lot there, just because like when you think about building a business plan, one, do you advise like every company to build out a business plan? I want to start with there as well then.
Absolutely. I mean, for our business in general, almost every client we've worked with, as long as I've been operating, we build out a franchise business plan to help them through this process. And I think it's critical. I mean, it's the old adage, right? If you fail to plan, then you're planning to fail. I mean, it's really straightforward.
There's so much that goes with the business planning. It's like you plan, but like there's also a lot of stuff that can happen where like you can't expect it to happen. But there are ways to mitigate some of these challenges that come with franchising. So like, what professionals should business owners look for when franchising? I imagine lawyers, accountants, consultants play critical roles, but are there any other business owners should consider when working with professionals?
Absolutely. So there are, in franchising, most quality advisors in franchising refer to the 3 C's in franchising. It's the consultant, the counsel, and the CPA. And so those are going to be 3 big things. A consultant like our group and what I do really comes in to help advise on operations, strategy, building manuals, documents, all of that. Your attorney and the lawyer is going to prepare the legal documents for franchising. And then franchising has ongoing compliance. Every year there's ongoing compliance and things you need to do. Plus, having a lawyer help sign documents. You know, I always view the franchise closing or signing similar to a real estate closing. And there are a lot of I's to dot and T's to cross. And so making sure that's done correctly. And then the third is just having a CPA to help with this. And in franchising, not only just for general business practices, filing taxes and things like that. In franchising, after a franchisor has been operating for a while, or depending on the state they're expanding into, they have to have a franchise audit completed by a CPA. And it's a whole process that the franchise company has to go through. And so making sure you have a reputable, quality CPA group is important.
It sounds like someone might be listening to this right now, and listeners, I am definitely mindful. You guys might be thinking, oh my God, this sounds super expensive. I don't know if I can do this, but let's kind of debunk that, demyth that if we can. Once you know what you want to do here, it requires an investment, obviously. What are the typical costs involved with setting up a franchising company?
So the costs that are typically involved in setting up a franchise company, between hiring a consultant if they want a more of a do it for you type service where you're going to hire professionals to make sure you're taking the best step forward and keeping your path narrow. That's what I always describe is when hiring professionals like us, your zigs and zags are going to be a lot shorter versus trying to figure it on your own. And by the way, that's the whole main sales presentation or marketing pitch for when you're selling a franchise is if you buy a franchise, you help keep that franchisee's pathway to success shorter and more narrow with fewer zigs and zags. So when someone's thinking about the costs to get involved with this, we typically budget between consulting fees, lawyer fees, and I like to budget in there even a first couple years of advertising, marketing, budgeting. If you're budgeting somewhere around about $100,000, that's all in everything, including working capital and marketing for a few years to get this thing charged up, you should be in a good spot. Now, depending on how you do it, it could be less, it could be more, but I think that's a good benchmark. And for most businesses, that's the same or less expensive than what it would actually cost to open up another operating unit of whatever they have.
And then with someone that's going to buy into a franchise, are there any like ongoing fees and costs that they should consider or they should know about before they actually do that? Tom, you're dropping phenomenal advice here. And I'm very excited for like your academy course with this as well, because I think franchising, I want to say again, is like super interesting. It's like a whole topic in itself. I think it's a great avenue for entrepreneurship. But of course, there are legal fees and everything that goes on beyond it. But yeah, talk to us about what you can expect if you're buying into a franchise then.
Yeah. So ongoing fees is if you're buying into a franchise system, the first is just general business fees. You're going to have to pay any city tax, sales tax, whatever kind of stuff, right? Just normal business stuff that you're going to do, whether it's a franchise or an independent, doesn't matter. Beyond that, then for a franchise, your biggest fee as a franchisee for most systems is going to be your royalty. And the royalty is typically a percentage of top line revenue that you're going to pay to the franchisor each month or each week. It's generally monthly or weekly. And that ranges for a fixed location franchise will generally range between about 4 to 7% of gross sales. And then for a service-based business, or usually a business with some higher margins on it, will oftentimes range from about 7% to 12%. Now, that's a general range. Some are more, some are less. Of course, there are always exceptions, but that should at least help someone sort through that. Other fees include an ongoing marketing fund. Each brand kind of calls it something different: an advertising fund, marketing fund, brand development fund. It's 1 to 2% of sales typically. And then there are technology fees in today's world where it's going to include a lot of franchisors, instead of having franchisees kind of piecemeal a tech stack in today's world, they're actually just lumping it all together as one fee for maybe a CRM or a point of sale system or an email marketing platform or some technology tools and systems for the business.
Yeah, it's always there. And you brought up a certain point that I do want to talk about, because I do want to talk about different opportunities in different industries. So when you think about margins, if someone wants to buy into a franchise for their very first time and they're only worried about margins, they don't care about being passionate about what they're in, what would you have them look at?
Usually businesses that have high margins in most cases tend to be service related businesses, and they tend to be niche or what I call unattractive businesses. So if someone says, well, I just want a high margin business, I don't really care, chances are the work you're going to be doing is, I can give a good example. I owned a franchise in the restoration industry where you'd come in, emergency services, a pipe breaks in a home or a property, something, right? Maybe there's mold or whatever all over the place, and you got to come in and clean it up. Usually these dirty businesses, they tend to have higher margins because people don't want to do that. There are franchises that do crime scene cleanup. I mean, that is not a business that someone necessarily would go after, but they also, because very few people want to do it and it's unique, they generally have higher margins compared to, let's just say, a local sub shop where you have independents and franchises and just a lot of competition going after that customer.
I want to hit on the crime scene one. I think that just proves that there's really is like a business idea for anything if you're willing to get your hands dirty on that.
Yeah, and it's an industry just to use. I know it is morbid, but when you think about it, and it could just be someone, an old lady or an old man just happened to die in their home. Somebody's got to come and just, there's a mess that's left that's got to get cleaned up there.
I just want to specifically ask this question because a lot of people that do listen to this, they want to make money with entrepreneurship ventures. That's why a high majority of people probably get into entrepreneurship. What's like the cap here? Like, are you able to make, if you do it correctly, up to $10 million, $50 million? Is this capped just with like all the royalties? Like, what is the actual earning potential for someone's personal lifestyle?
Okay, that's a great question. So there are a lot of factors to this, and it is going to depend. It's the classic consultant answer. It depends. However, I can give you some general ideas for someone who's maybe starting that search or getting into it. For someone who's coming in that's going to own a single franchise and they're going to own and operate it, most franchise systems are going to produce, in my experience, a range that I've seen somewhere between about $50,000 to a couple $100,000 in income a year. Okay. That's just what they're going to produce. It is what it is for most businesses. There are exceptions and so on, but think of it. Some people say, well, I'm buying a job. Well, you kind of are. So if you're going to own and operate it, I encourage you to not just look at dollars and cents, but consider the lifestyle you want to live and the type of people you want to be working with, the types of customers you want to serve. There are a lot of factors that go into it. So that's one, if you're an owner operator. Then you can start expanding and building on that into multi-unit operators. And I can give a really good example. The largest Pizza Hut franchisee, I want to say it was 800 some units. Okay, that's one franchisee had venture capital invest in their business to acquire the second largest Pizza Hut franchisee that had 700 some units. So now you have one franchisee that has over 1,500 franchises in one franchisee. So just to give you an idea from, well, just an owner operator in a business that, grosses $250,000 a year and you make an okay living, but maybe you're serving your community, you're happy, living a lifestyle you want, up to literally hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue between a collective portfolio of franchises you own.
I wanted to really hit on that because it brings to mind in my hometown. We have a Scooter's Coffee. There's someone in my hometown that owns like 15 of these things. And he owns like 5 different car washes and things. Obviously, you get there, you're not going to get there off the bat, but it talks about earning potential once you do scale and get multiple franchises under your belt.
Yeah. And the multi-unit operators, it's a different game. It's a different mindset. But once you get enough going in, let's say your first brand A, you end up buying, after you get a few of those up and rolling, now all of a sudden you start thinking, I have systems in place. I have hiring systems. I can now buy brand B and brand C. And so industries where you see multi-unit operators very common are food service, where someone owns 20 Taco Bells and 10 KFCs and 20 Jimmy John's and so on, where they own a whole bunch of those. You have the salon space where people own salons and these like a Great Clips and some of these others. You see it common in fitness as well, where people own fitness related. And then the other is hotel, motel, or the lodging industry. So those are 4 common industries where you see multi-unit operators that buy a bunch of franchises, often of different brands over time.
Yeah, I think that's what's is so cool. You said like Great Clips, like that's another franchising opportunity for someone to consider. A selfish question that I kind of have here is, when do you recommend someone to get into franchising? I'm 25 years old. Would you recommend a 25-year-old, if they're even able to start buying these franchisees? Would you recommend them they get corporate experience first? When is really the right time for someone to buy this?
As a franchisee, someone looking to buy a franchise, is that your question?
Yeah. And
okay.
You could say it depends as well. Like, I hear you.
Yeah, it does depend. Certainly your background and experience is helpful into it. So if you're 25 looking to buy a franchise, I would consider one where maybe you don't have to manage as many people because you haven't had that opportunity to grow as a manager yet and to develop as a manager. Maybe you have. Maybe you've been working as a manager somewhere for 5-7 years already. Great. If you've got that background and skill set. There are plenty of 50-year-olds that have very limited or no management background that buy franchises. The other thing to think about is your budget and what you have available and what you can afford. So very often a typical franchise buyer is an average age is going to be closer to around 50 years old. Late 40s, early 50s is where, if you kind of look at this bell curve, that's where most franchise buyers, 40 to 60 years old. And part of that is someone's been working a job, working a career for a while, and they've realized, I'm tired of working for someone else's dream. I want to do my own, but I don't know what I want to do. And I'm maybe a little too nervous to start my own. And so I'd rather just execute on a franchise system and buy a franchise to get this up and going. And so I always describe franchising really as a confidence elixir. That's the terms I use to help a budding entrepreneur take that step into entrepreneurship. Because anyone who says franchising is not entrepreneurship has never been in it or is kidding themselves. Because owning a franchise is 100% entrepreneurship. When I owned my franchise, I was doing my own thing, and whether the business grew or shrank or did whatever it did based on the decisions I made, the effort I put in, the team I hired, and so on.
Tom, you're dropping a lot of good advice here. And I can speak for everyone that's in the UpFlip Academy. I'm super excited for your course to drop. I'm very excited for that. So I will be on the lookout for that. And everyone, go check out the UpFlip Academy where we are there, and Tom will be dropping more insights. This has been a phenomenal interview. We got a lot of questions in, but we do need to end with our 5 Fan Blitz questions here. And these are questions submitted from our community. And guys, if you want to join in on world-class entrepreneurs, go to www.youtube.com/UpFlip and submit your questions there. But Tom, ready for our last 5 quick Fan Blitz questions?
Let's go.
Awesome. Number 1, what is the most important thing to consider before franchising your business?
To me, the most important thing for you to consider before you're franchising your business is really answering the question, what do I want to be when I grow up? I can't answer that for you. And so you have to determine, do you really want to grow your business or not? And do you really want to expand or not? There are a lot of people who say they do, but their actions don't correlate.
I love it. Number 2, do I need to have a lot of money in order to buy a franchise, or how can I do it with not much liquid capital?
There are franchises available for literally almost any budget. So working with, whether it's a really great franchise broker or doing a quick search, there are lots of franchise sites where you can find investments ranging less than $10,000 to over $1 million.
Is there like a certain site, one site that comes to mind where people can search for franchising opportunities, or do they need to go to individual websites?
So there are websites available, websites, for example, like franchisedirect.com, franchisegator.com, and a bunch of others that exist like that, where they're kind of an aggregator of franchises available that you can go on and find those and reach out to them directly through that.
Love the mention with FranchiseGator and Franchise Direct there. I want to let the listeners know as well, you guys can go to upflip.com and find a ton of resources when it comes to starting your first franchise as well that fits your needs, fits your budget, fits what you're looking to start. So definitely check it up at upflip.com. Tom, let's go to our next Fan Blitz question here. Number 3, if you could have anyone in the world endorse your business, who would it be and why?
Oh, that's a great question. Anyone in the world, I would say right now, I really like Gary Vee. So Gary Vaynerchuk would be a great endorsement to have. I just think he does business so well, and he's got great perspective. It's practical and simple, and yet difficult to execute. So getting an endorsement from him would be really powerful.
2 more here. Do you ever tell business owners that franchising won't work for them? And if so, why?
Yes, I do. I do tell business owners franchising won't work for them. And it tends to be for a couple of reasons. One is just their business, the numbers don't make sense. The financials, the business isn't profitable yet, or we start working in our franchise business plan and don't see that it makes sense for a franchisee, the numbers for a franchisee. And then number 2 is based on the sentiment or disposition of the founder. And what is the sentiment of that person? What is their driver for doing this? If they're just doing this for money, or their greed, or they want to expand for the sake of fluffing their ego, I am very cautious to recommend franchising to people with that type of sentiment. It just is, you're setting yourself up for a whole lot of problems and headaches, and you're better off just to avoid it and expand some other way.
I love it. That's really good advice there. Last Fan Blitz question for you. What's the biggest misconception people have about your position?
Well, I would just quickly ask my position in terms of consulting, advising people, in terms of being the founder and CEO of my business. I guess, what do you mean by that?
I'd say founder and CEO of your business.
I would say the biggest misconception people have of my position is that I'm in an ivory tower, and we are a small family-owned operation. So even though we have lots of big names on our client list and we service companies all over the country, all around the world, at the end of the day, we've got about 14 people here. We're family run, family operated. I'm an owner operator. So I'm in the thick of this every day, just like other folks that are coming into it. So I would say that's probably the biggest misconception, is that for my role and what I do is I'm in the thick of doing stuff every day for the company.
You need to be a visionary, but you also need to be able to put the gloves on and get dirty with it. So Tom, this has been amazing. Generally so excited for that workshop to drop. I want to thank you again so much for coming on the podcast. If we could ask you one more question, where can people learn more about you and connect with you?
The best place to go is our website, bigskyfranchiseteam.com. That's bigskyfranchiseteam.com. We offer a free consultation. We have a free franchisability quiz, and we have a bunch of downloads and free content that's just available to support someone that's starting this journey.
Everyone, that was an amazing episode with Tom. I'm super excited for his program to come out in the UpFlip Academy, so definitely give that a shot. 3 quick takeaways for you. Number 1, if you're looking to start franchising your own company or buy into a franchise, this is a great opportunity for anyone that wants to get started in their entrepreneurial journey. 2, what I really liked is him being specific about the high margin areas. These are your service business, your window washings, your house repairs. These service-based industries have a ton of high margins for you to look at. Number 3, franchising expands beyond just your fast food chains. This goes all the way into those service businesses, into massage parlors, into car dealerships. There's a lot of great opportunities for you to get started if you are looking to find an industry for you when it comes to franchising. And everyone, if you're interested in working with Tom, check out the link in the show notes below to get started with your first franchise. Tom, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.